started here. My name is Dawn Ross. I'm the director of the Career Services Office, and I want to welcome everybody here, especially my staff, our esteemed employer partners, and our wonderful students. So we look forward to hearing, great advice from our two wonderful guests today. And basically, I'm just going to start off, as I have all week, Jessica, with just telling us a little bit about you, your role, and what was the path that got you where you are today? What was your career path?
Well, I'll try to be as concise as possible, but yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Jessica Rossio, and I'm the director and curator at the Danforth Art Museum at Framingham State University. I've been involved with the Danforth since 2010, and so I've seen it through its pre-FSU's days, its closure, its merging with FSU, its renovation and rebuilding, and now reopening. So me and the Danforth are very close at this point. I've been the curator there since 2015, and our executive director retired in December. And I am now also the director. And in many ways, the director search in kind of interesting ways became a bit of a casualty of COVID, in that when we had started interviewing for the position and then everything shut down. And then when we looked at our staff and we looked at our budget, one of the things that we realized was probably the best thing to do would be to do a little bit of restructuring. So we kind of reallocated the funds. And so I was the interim director. I stayed as the director, but we actually now have two positions that we're going to be hiring for in the coming months, which you're not hearing a lot of hiring right now, but we've created a development position and an education position, which we're really excited about because that's going to help us be a much kind of fuller museum. So I've been, like I said, I've been at the Danforth for a long time. My heart is really in curatorial work, though I love being the director as well. And so that's kind of what I had always wanted to do. When I was in undergraduate, I knew I wanted to do museum work. I'd always been interested in museums in general and the idea of curatorial work without having any idea what that meant. So I did a lot of internships as an undergrad, and this was over 20 years ago, and they were absolutely not paid. You wouldn't even think of asking for a paid internship at the time in the arts. I tried a bunch of things. I tried museum education. I tried historical societies because I had thought that I went to college in Colonial Williamsburg, and I thought that that was like the perfect place to be. And I realized pretty quickly that I actually really loved art museums. And I ended up moving, and not that it's a fine line between history and art history, but as an art historian, I have to say, like, oh, I made the huge change from history to art history. But anyway, after college, I took an unpaid internship and at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. And I basically told them I wasn't going to leave until they found a job for me, which I said politely. But I had a ton of part-time jobs at the time. I mean, it's a very sad arts story. But a curatorial assistant position opened up, and because I'd been interning there, and they interviewed me and I got it, and I stayed there for a few years and I loved it. And I kind of got the groundwork of what an art museum is. At the time, I thought the National Museum of Women in the Arts was incredibly tiny because they only had 60 employees. The Danforth has 4 employees. So I think you got a sense of, I got a sense of over the years, how small museums work, how larger museums work, and how you can carry those things across the two platforms. And then my boss essentially told me I wasn't going to get any further unless I went to graduate school. So I did at that time I got my master's in art history. Again, which sounds incredibly useful, but it was what I really wanted to do. And then throughout that, I also continued at least interning in museums, because I knew that even though academics were very important to me, I did not want to go the professor route, which a lot of times once you get into graduate school, that's what, you know, your professors start talking to you about. And particularly because then I went on to get a PhD in American Studies. And that's what brought me to Boston about 15 years ago now. And my professors there really wanted me to consider staying in academia, and I'm not an academic. And so I am, and so basically I, you know, and that's what led me to the Danforth. I was doing a lot of adjunct work, and I had a fellowship at the MFA, and at one point I had like 5 different part-time jobs while in school, and my advisor was like, you're literally never going to finish unless you just like, so, which you probably all hear. And so so I started consulting at the Danforth back in 2010 on one exhibition that they were doing. And I guess like at the Women's Museum, I just never left. So I just stayed throughout the whole time. So I've done a lot of things at the Danforth, but I would say that just kind of, it's horrible. It's such a cliche to say that being in the right place at the right time is often how it works, but that's kind of what I found. But I mean, it's a field I've definitely been consistently pursuing doggedly for over 20 years now. So it was a very fast, no breathing thumbnail view, but there you go.
Well, Jessica, it sounds like you're somebody who doesn't take no for an answer. You're going to, you know, you have a lot of confidence in your abilities and skills, which I love to see. I'm sure our students will really appreciate to learn more about that. And next up is Courtney. Tell us a little bit about you and your role now, and how you got to that role.
Thank you, Dawn. I just want to thank Dawn and Wendy. It's so good to see all of you. I miss being there in person and speaking with all of you, but this is how we're doing it. So my name is Courtney Thraen, and I run a nonprofit. And the name of the nonprofit is Downtown Framingham, Inc. And the mission of the nonprofit is to build business, community, and culture in the downtown Framingham area. And this nonprofit was created in 2009, and it really got going in 2012. And it follows the Main Street America platform, which is to do a lot of different things. And so I'm kind of all over the place, but it's really good. And just quickly, the 4 things that we really focus on are urban design and placemaking. So we do a lot of public installations, murals, things of that nature, how people experience the urban environments, really focused on that area. We do promoting the area, promoting the businesses in general. Like we have 10 parks downtown, we have 7 little grocery stores downtown, things of that nature. We had like 8 arts and entertainment places downtown, and then, you know, pre-COVID. So we had a lot of activity, a lot of fitness centers going. So urban design, landscaping, things like that, promoting the area. We provide a lot of support to the little small businesses. And when I say little, I mean like 5 or fewer employees, most of them are, and making sure their voices are heard to the local government too when it comes to policy issues. And those policy issues can range from like parking management to do we want to have marijuana dispensaries downtown, things of that nature, safety elements. And so it is very cool to be in that democratic process where you get signatures and you say, hey, we're excited about this factory expanding, or we aren't excited about this other factory expanding, or whatever the hot policy button issue is. So, and a lot of the businesses, they're multicultural and they don't have time to participate in the government. So making sure that I can step up and, you know, the voice of the unheard is what you're always trained to do. So small business support. And then lastly, organizational partnerships. So we work a lot with Framingham State University. And the best thing about the students that I've worked with, and, you know, I've been 3.5 years I've been doing this, is the students usually aren't from Framingham, and they come in and they don't know a ton about downtown, but they're super eager to be in the area, learning about the community, developing relationships, and doing small incremental things that cumulatively over time make a big difference in the spirit of the area, and making sure everyone can have a good positive sensory experience, if you will, there. So we work with the History Center, the public school system, other places to really do our best. So it's a very broad overriding goals that we have. We have shared goals with other organizations. And so if we can do programs where we work with others to meet those shared goals as well. And I really encounter a lot of heavy topics. It can be something like sustainability, health and wellness. It can be safety. It can be the opioid crisis. It could be racial equality is a big one that I deal with, immigration policy. So you're really looking at, hitting hurdles all of the time and trying to troubleshoot and to develop relationships that are worthwhile. So it can be pretty intense at times. And so you have to pace yourself. And we do a lot of cool events too, where we do virtual events now. So try to find ways to demonstrate community spirit, as qualitative as that sounds. And so we have quantitative things we do and qualitative things that we do for our stakeholders. So we really try to work with everybody as much as possible that we can. Yeah, and I know that sounds very abstract, probably from your student perspective, but there are other like downtown programs across the country. So it's cool for me to check out and see, what is San Diego doing? What is Boston doing? What is Franklin, Massachusetts doing? And how they approach this model and how we get through the COVID period, as it twists and turns and evolves this year. So my career path, it wasn't direct. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started off at Ohio State. I was in the Navy ROTC program. My mom made me do that, and I was pretty sure I was going to quit the first week, and I didn't. Somehow I stuck it out, and it turned to work out really well. But when I was studying at Ohio State, I studied journalism and political science, and storytelling. Whatever field you go into, you want to tell the story. You want to capture people's hearts by telling the story. So I think that storytelling element is really important, whatever field you go into. So I did the journalism and public policy, and then I was commissioned in the Navy as and I was navigator on my ship out of Washington State. So that was really fun. I got to visit a bunch of countries, and I worked with a very diverse crew. We had sailors on board that were working on getting their citizenship at the time that were immigrants. And so I feel like I'm in it's like the Navy, but it's downtown Framingham basically. And I'm older, so things aren't as overwhelming as when I was 24 years old. So, but I got to see the world, and I got to go to Africa and Australia and Malaysia and all these cool places. And that really gave me insight on how to appreciate the cultural norms that others have. And we have that melting pot here in America, and specifically in downtown Framingham. And so I think translating those, you always want to take your skill sets and translate them. And so that's been really rewarding and enriching for me, doing that. And then after I worked on the ship for like 4 years, I got a teaching job at Mass Maritime Academy, which was really fun to be in the classroom with the students. That I was one of those students, and then there I was their teacher. So that was a little bit eye-opening. But I got a master's degree in public policy at UMass Dartmouth at the time. And public policy is really cool because you can see, and I use that today, like I said, translating that whenever you are applying for a grant, for instance. I'm sure Jessica applies for grants. You always want to say, this is the program that we want to do, and this is how we're going to measure the results. This is how it's going to be implemented. And these are, we always want to continuously know how to measure results. And a lot of public policy is assessing policy, measuring the results, changing things over time, and looking at that and getting how we get that feedback and the input from the community. So it was cool to learn that process and really dive into that. I wasn't able to get a job in public policy, so I ended up working at the Department of Veterans Affairs for almost 4 years processing disability claims. And I got really into that, and I kind of burnt out a little because it is stressful, but it was just like that, taking care of others. And I worked with homeless veterans specifically, and trying to help them get shelter and care. So that was very rewarding too. While I was doing that, I was like, oh, I want to get a job in city planning, because city planning is more about implementing mechanisms to change the built environment or bring people together, and assessing those social experiments, if you will, and how those interactions kind of shape and evolve over time. Whether it's green space, roads, bike lanes, you name it, the ways the stores are designed, and how we experience life, essentially. And so specifically in like dense urban environments where you have universities close by, hospitals close by, and how we all work together. And so I did that at Boston University, and I was able to use GI Bill for that, which was sweet. And then just happenstance, I was working at Boston University for a little while, and I met the lady that was running this organization, and she was on her way out, and I interviewed for an assistant position, and she's like, no, you need to be the director. And so then I took that over and like threw myself into it and didn't pace myself. And so this has been a very stressful year, but it's been a very rewarding experience to work with so many amazing students that have gone on to work at Netflix, to work at Citizens Bank, to work at go into the U.S. Army like full time. And the students I have, they're just so enthusiastic about the opportunity to make their impression and leave their, you know, their fingerprint and their footprints on downtown. So
Wow.
that's my story.
And it's such an amazing story. I never tire, and I always learn new things every time I hear from you. And, you know, both of you, Framingham State students are just really blessed to have these great opportunities within your organizations. Courtney, I know you're a you know, a lone wolf there, but you absolutely utilize Framingham State students for your internships. And as Jessica, I know you say that you're in a search now. You're hiring for 2. Also, for many, you know, I've been there, Framingham State, for 18 years. We've always worked closely with the Danforth on internships. And could you talk to the students about what do you like to see in a resume, and what stands out to you as some of the most important things that a student can do, either going for an internship or going for that first postgraduate job?
Sure. And I should also say that we have started an internship program at the Danforth. And one of the really wonderful things about being part of Framingham State is that we are pretty much exclusively working with Framingham State students now. At the Danforth before, we worked with a lot of Framingham State students, which was wonderful. But I think now we can have a much more kind of focused approach, which I've really enjoyed. And we've had 2 interns so far, and they were both curatorial interns, because right now we do, as I said, we have 2 full-time and 2 part-time people on staff. So we were really only at the bandwidth for 1 or 2 interns at a time. And what I really loved about both Libby and Renan, and I'm hoping interns coming forward, is at least when I'm thinking about internships, like someone who's just coming in with an interest in the arts and in museums, and not even necessarily, both Libby and Renan, our 2 previous interns, were art history majors, but we're working with students now in visitor services who are not, and they're just really interested in the structure of an arts organization or the structure of a museum. And so for internships, I kind of like the blank slate, and just really being very interested in learning about how an arts organization works or how a museum works. Because at a small museum like the Danforth, if you come in as an intern, you really do have the opportunity to do everything in terms of the visitor services aspect. Both of our interns were helping us deinstall shows. They were helping our installers put up the shows. They were helping us draft text for the walls, creating educational materials in terms of scavenger hunts. So things that we were working with them throughout the entire thing, but we were basically able to say, well, what aspect of the museum experience would you like to focus on? And I think that when you are able to immerse yourself into an environment like that, you get a pretty clear sense pretty quickly of what you might like about museums or what you might not like about museums. So I think in terms of a resume, depending on whether you're looking for an internship or a job, I think as much experience as you have across the board, you should be listing, particularly when you're younger. Like, no one is expecting to see that you are already in your field. And so, like Courtney said, I mean, it's good to see how your skills will transfer, regardless of anything that you've done in high school and in college, how those skills are going to transfer into another professional organization. And so I think just being kind of and I think probably everyone will say this, but when you're kind of writing down what your skill set is, I mean, almost everything that you've done, you can somehow make work universally, particularly if you're working with colleagues or if you're working with the public. And I think in terms of a job, and depending on what the job, like what level of experience the job is looking for, we recently hired a new collections manager, who is our other full-time position, and she oversees the collection in terms of taking care of it, its stewardship, the works that come in and the works that go out. So she does a lot of the behind the scenes work. And that position, we were looking for someone who did already have some museum experience. Rachel had been a collections manager in an even smaller organization before. So in that case, we weren't necessarily looking for someone who already was going to know exactly every element of the position, but was able to take, her previous job had been a part-time job at a historical society. And so at least there, I was looking to make sure that there had been like some elements of what we were looking for, but knowing that with most jobs, particularly in museums, you really do learn when you're there, because every museum, and I think probably every cultural organization, operates a little bit differently. So I know that's not a ton of specifics about what you would have, but I guess I would say, particularly in this field, you shouldn't ever think that you don't have enough experience, because
That's
you
great.
learn a lot quickly.
Great advice. Great advice. And Courtney, I know most of the time I just say, please hire this intern, but what do you look for in your resumes for your internship candidates?
So most of the time I have internship candidates that are really focused on like the business side, or they're in the communication side. And so for those interns that aren't specifically like computer analysts or like website support folks, for the business folks and the communication folks, I really look for people skills, because you've had a lot of time to hone your computer skills. And I think, in this day and age specifically, like learning how to listen to people and earn their trust and build relationships, like that's extremely, extremely valuable. And I think it's something that's hard to put a price tag on as far as your skill sets, but the better that you can really sell yourself and compel. A lot of times, we work with individuals and we're selling a program, or we're selling an event, or we're selling a policy initiative, and we want people to get on board, or we want to listen to what their feedback is, sort of in an unbiased way. So getting people to open up and talk and really listen and find out what motivates them. It's very salesperson-y, but you're doing it for altruistic reasons. We don't have like a bottom line where you have to get accounts. So those skill sets are really important. And then also, like, whatever initiative we're working on, is it effective? If I get a grant to do like music performances and to bring people together in a cross-cultural sort of context, is it effective in its goal? And being able to measure that and being able to shift and adjust if we're not effective, and looking at things through that critical lens. So, being able to think in a nuanced style. And so when I look at resumes, food experience is huge for me. If you've been a restaurant worker or you've had any sort of food experience, that's huge. That means that you're on your feet, you're talking to people, you're able to respond when someone's like, you brought me the wrong thing, and you can keep your head up. Those are key skill sets that I think you can take and you can refocus your energy into something that's going to have a holistic, large scale effect on a community, and learning from that. Any sort of job where your listening skills are sort of put to the test. And when I look at the courses that you've taken, and I talk about those, just talking to you and trying to assess your critical thinking skills, because a lot of times when you read the news or social media, things are always oversimplified, and you always want to be able to, when you're creating a program or a policy, look at it from every complete angle and try to anticipate the unexpected or unanticipated consequences. you know, that you would be doing to promote an area or make an area better. If you're trying to make an area better, maybe it could be having negative effects on someone else. And so you always want to look at things from a 360-degree angle. And I've worked with psychology students. You know, we have an elderly population that's right downtown. You know, is the urban environment good for and accommodating to those who may not have the best, you know, physical capabilities in their life or something of that nature. And so do people feel welcome and things of that, what does that mean, feeling welcome? And so food experience is always really good. Writing is important, how you write. Like we have a lot of marketing students, and how you can, you know, put a sentence together is huge, and the words that you choose to use. And so just the basics, you know, people skills, writing, listening. I mean, those things are huge. And I think sometimes they get overshadowed by other things that are flashier in today's technological medical age. But I think those building blocks are always going to be really valuable.
You know, I just want to piggyback on that because we're trying to, you know, try to focus, though arts and humanities, it's so broad. You know, I have a lot of employers say, yes, I want a humanities, arts and humanities students because they have that critical thinking. They are really good writers. They communicate well. So, you know, thinking about that type of role in that major, could you think of maybe some positions that you've known about that arts and humanities students excel at? Either Jessica or Courtney. Like
when
as
you
a
say
major,
positions,
yeah.
like positions in my organization, or just like jobs?
Just general. Kind of like maybe a general, you know, I know you've had a lot of different roles in your life.
Yeah. I had, you know, customer service reps at businesses, like business development managers at banks. You'll see a lot of like development manager or community relations. Like those jobs are always, you know, they're always sought after. I did sales for like 4 months once, and I got too many accounts, and I told my boss, like, I can't get any more accounts because I have to take care of my people. And then I quit that job because it was so focused on the bottom line. But development managers, like community relations type folks are always, you know, there's a lot of jobs out there in general with banks or other residential management properties, like apartment real estate. There are always going to be a lot of positions like that are out there. That's more of the people, you know, customer facing elements where you can have like a steady career. And when you work like in a residential apartment community, you're going to be like hosting events and doing arts and, you know, bringing the cultural elements into it. There's a property downtown, Alta Union House, and they're having like an arts and humanities sort of position there where they have events for their residents, and they try to build that sense of cohesive community together with them. And I had a student that was an intern, and then he was my assistant, and then he went on to work at Netflix, and he was like a production assistant, a PA for a movie crew. So he was sort of that operational side where he's got the radio and they're organizing the setup. And he actually worked with the Chris Evans movie that was going on at the old Danforth. And so I let him go do that for 2 weeks, and he got sucked into the whole Netflix element. So, and then I have another student that actually went like full-time Army when COVID hit. And so he was able to, a lot of the work that he did was just the outreach, pulling the events together like that we had, working with different populations, and just understanding what their needs were and responding to those. And so military is always good, taking care of your people, that always, you know, goes far, but also any communications type jobs, community relations, in any sort of field. And I think creativity is also important. I think if you have any creative gears in your brain, like that can kind of separate you from the pack. Because I think a lot of times you're like told how to think, and you can get into a groove, and you can, when you do that, you lose that creativity that you may have had when you were a young child. And so you want to tap back into that imagination you had when you were little to reimagine how things could be. So
yeah, I know that Jen, when we have the question part, Janice wants to pick your brain, but I told her, she said, would this be good for her to go because she wants to go into event management? And I said, I think that Courtney, I know you've done over 200 events since you've been down, since you've in your role. as director. And you know, you work with so many different people, so I know she's going to pick your brain later. Jessica, you know, you seem to be in arts and humanities like that. You've been in that kind of field your whole life. What would you say to students that are in this major now, and what are some of the things that you've seen that you know, that these majors are highly sought after for?
I think that when you have an arts and humanities major, there's very little that you can't do, because one of the things that I have found over the years, that particularly as I've gotten older, it's and Courtney already mentioned this, but knowing how to write is so important. And that's something that really you get at an art. I mean, you start to develop that with an arts and humanities major. And so being able to express yourself on paper and being able to do it concisely and having communication skills is so incredibly important. I think particularly now when there's so much that we do digitally, and there's so much that we do via email, and there's so much that we do via text, that the ability to communicate and to express yourself is never not going to be a good thing. And I know that particularly, I mean, because I've been in museums my entire career, that a lot of, and if it's going into the arts is something that is of interest, when you enter this field, everyone's kind of on a very level playing field, as in, like, there are development positions, there are membership positions, there are special events positions. They're all looking for people with arts and humanities backgrounds, because then you're able to fit into this environment and you learn that particular job, and then you learn about how that particular element, and particularly if you continue with it, I mean, you're always going to need a little bit of development and marketing and membership and events, because it then kind of translates into all nonprofit management. And so I think it's really a degree where if you have those basic building blocks, you're able to just, everything that you do, whether you're, you know, find yourself working retail, or you're in a restaurant, or, you know, you're able to pull it into what, and I know Courtney's experience the same thing. When you're in a small organization, the more that you know how to do, the more successful your organization can become, because I am often incredibly envious of the hundreds and hundreds of people who work at the MFA, because there are things that, like, I guarantee that none of them, 95% of those people have not had to worry about their facilities. And I think that it's something that, I mean, so having that kind of broad experience is good. When I was at the MFA, I was there for 2 years and I had 3 tasks. Like, it was like 3 things that I worked on for 2 years. And that's not how most arts organizations operate.
Right.
So.
When you talk about the interview process, normally, you know, I don't know if you do the phone screen first or if you do the virtual Zoom meeting first. I'll start with you again, Jessica. What is kind of like your process for the interview process?
We haven't done any interviews via Zoom yet, because we have not, but we do generally, which we will be doing in the coming months. So it is kind of like a 2-step process. Once we get all of depending on the position, when we pull in all of the resumes and CVs, and we're looking to make sure we're pulling out the people that have the basic skills for what we're looking at. And I also think that for a lot of our positions, the more well-rounded, the better, because so communication and kind of working within this, you know, small team that does a lot is important. And then we do usually do an initial phone screen with people, and I imagine now that will be more, but we haven't hired anyone since Zoom, so I feel like the Zoom thing is going to be something we're doing this fall. And then we bring people in person, just to make, because again, we're a very small team, so we want to make sure that regardless of the position, that person can really just function with the rest of us. So I think that, and so that's again why I think being able to, like, have, you know, communication skills and people skills, and it just is so, it goes such a long way, because when I talk to someone on the phone and when I meet someone in person, I'm thrilled with your experience. And if you have experience, But what's, I think, ultimately most important is whether or not we can all work together. So.
Absolutely, and I see that in, you know, every article you read about the important skills. The ability to work within this team is really one of the most important skills and competencies that that students could have. So I'm glad that you said that. And Courtney, I know you've been involved in some searches, and to give the students some tips on either the getting, you know, the phone screen and or the video interview.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I also worked with some high school mass hire students over the summer in this virtual environment, and so I was working hard just to try to get everyone into a routine when that program was happening. But I usually do a phone call first, and then I'll follow that up with a Zoom call just to make sure that we're on the same page. And really, when I talk to students that are interested in working with me in the organization, I try to tap into their energy. I like to work with enthusiastic students, and because this job can be, you need to be enthusiastic and passionate about the community. So that's like baseline requirement. You can't be like apathetic about it. So I try to first kind of gauge the energy and where the students are coming from. And then I want to know, like, how well do the students know themselves, like their strengths and weaknesses, and when it comes to common like platforms, what they're comfortable with using, and are they open to training? If it's like, oh, this is what we use for our newsletter, or this is how we use PowerPoint to make videos or something. And so different communication software tips and their willingness to like learn and walk around and meet people. And a lot of times for me, pre-COVID, walking around with students and introducing them to business owners was also very interesting to me, because then I could kind of watch how they introduce themselves and how they, you know, greet strangers. And so a lot of that was interesting. But for the phone call and the video calls, I just want to make sure the students feel confident about themselves. They kind of know what they want. They know some things that they're good at, and they know some things that they need to work on and improve on, and they want to learn on. So I always want to give people training opportunities to learn. I mean, this is a experimental sort of organization, and so that's the beauty of it. And knowing like when they're free, when they're available, and if they can kind of get into a work routine. I've seen students since COVID, a lot of them, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of them stay up super late till like 3 a.m. and then they get up at 12 p.m. and then they're like working on projects, you know, at 2:30 in the morning. And I'm like, I'm getting emails at 2:30 in the morning. That's interesting. So, because typically like pre-COVID, they would come and meet with me in the office, and we would, you know, I would try to do a hybrid, like you work in the office these many hours, we work in the field, and you can also work remote a little bit too. So if it's fully remote, I want to make sure they're still able to, if they're comfortable walking around or, you know, working remote, but just having that sense of commitment to time, and that discipline is necessary, because when you go out in the quote real world, if you need to have that discipline, and so you're not going to be able to like work on things at 1 a.m. necessarily. So usually.
Courtney, what would you say is, how important is the networking piece with, you know, career exploration and, you know, interviews and jobs? And how important do you think it is for these students to learn basic interview, networking skills?
Networking is really important too. And a lot of times, if you're at a networking event, like it may feel sort of like fake. I don't want to say fake, but false, but forced, if you will. Whereas, you know, I'm very special or lucky where I get to be in these very organic, like my job is networking legit, and people want to come and meet me and talk to me that way. So, but if your job isn't like networking, like my job is networking, then you really need to jump on board. And when you have like the suitable solutions and you do that networking there, it's really important to take that seriously, and being able to, you know, walk up to someone that you don't know. And I know when we've had the meetings before, it was kind of finding out who the other person is and what they need, and sort of asking questions that are very grounded in humanity, because there's a lot of books on like how to start a conversation. And I think there's a lost art to that as we become more digitalized in the last 20 years or so. my parents in the Midwest are super good at it. And I don't know if it's a New England thing too, but really just being comfortable in introducing yourself to others. They may be like, there could be generational differences. You may look at them and be like, oh, that person seems very polished and professional, and I'm a newbie and entry level type worker. And that person looks intimidating just because they may be older and very professional in their role. You create a picture and ideas about people the second you look at them. And so that can inform and influence how you approach someone. So it's important to kind of do some of your own little bias training and kind of not let that scare you or deter you from introducing yourself, especially if you're a new person looking for a job. Because it's very easy to say, if you're well established and you have a lot of experience, to introduce yourself. But when you're very new and you don't know anyone and maybe you're in a new area, it can be very challenging. And in my role right now, if I see a new business owner or someone I haven't met, I can name drop, like no one's business, and then they'll feel comfortable and they'll trust me. You can't really name drop very well when you're like an entry level person trying to find a job. So I would definitely focus on like what you're looking for, your sense of self and your strengths are, and being endearing, and authentic as possible. Authenticity goes extremely long way, and it makes you, what is memorable about you? Like when you contact that person. So you want to change exchange business cards or go on their LinkedIn, but really try to make an impression where you're going to bring something to their team that they're going to need. So
right.
Hopefully opportunities for more follow-up too. Yeah.
Great advice. I like the being authentic. You never trip up if you're not, if you're being authentic. That's you. Jessica, would you add on to that any special tips for networking for students?
I would say that that yes, the certainly the being authentic, but also if you have an idea of what you want, particularly in the arts. I was horrible at networking. It terrified me. The polar opposite of Courtney, in that like it was like the idea of going to a conference and just introducing myself to people would just put me under a blanket. So so I think that I have found, as I have progressed in the field, that it's not a huge field, and there aren't always a ton of jobs available, particularly if you're looking in a museum environment. So I have found it's actually a really very friendly field, that if anyone ever gets in touch with me, regardless of your like entry level in particular, and I just need some advice, people are always willing to give it. I think that people in nonprofits and in the arts recognize that if you are making a commitment to this field, that it's difficult, and you've also been through a lot to get to where you are, and so you want to offer as much advice as possible. So I guess I've never really thought about being particularly friendly, but I want to help as many people as I can, because if I had not had people mentoring me with internships or really forcing me to go do something, I wouldn't have. So I think that I was more timid. So I think if you're a little timid about moving forward, you shouldn't be. So I think that like just reaching out to someone and saying like, I'd just like to talk to you about this, more often than not, people are very receptive.
Great advice. I cannot thank you enough. That's about enough of the scripted questions. Now we're going to hear from students, and it's going to be very exciting because I know they got a good question. I want to just give you guys a round of applause now. So thank you very much. I mean, great advice. I just cannot wait. The students that couldn't make it, it's going to be on tape so they can hear all this great advice. Open up the floor for questions. Any sort of questions for these wonderful experts here?
I will add just quickly, like if you're in a networking room, like in a chamber of commerce or something, and you have to introduce yourself to people and you're scared, the people that are like the customer relations folks from the banks will probably be there more often than not. and they're usually like the sweetest, nicest people. If you want to like do some warm-ups with networking, like the Avidia folks and Middlesex and Mutual One, all I can name any of them. Like they're probably the easiest people to start networking with if you're nervous, and they have mad connections to other people because they know everyone. So they'll be like, oh yeah, I know Jessica, or you know, the Danforth or whatever. So bank folks are very well connected networking wise, and they can kind of point you in good direction. So those are I just wanted to add that.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, Haley, I know you must have a question, you know, about, I mean, you've just started Framingham State as a first year student, which is really impressive that you're going to all these events, and, you know, I can't be happier. Do you have something you're thinking about, or do you know exactly what you want to do? Are you doing exploration with your major? Could you just talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind?
Of course. Yes, I'm an English major, and I'm considering minoring in American Sign Language, and everything that both of you, Jessica and Courtney, were talking about, it just excited me a lot to think about, because I'm still not completely sure what I want to concentrate in, and I'm not sure where like my job's going to lead me, but I'm excited to learn more, and especially in exploring public policy as well, because I know that's where change is really made and fostered, and that it was very exciting to hear about that. So I think that's definitely something I'd love to explore and learn more about. So thank you for all of your very helpful information today. Thank you.
Great. That's a great question, and I know the sky's the limit for you. You're going to be able to absorb the next 4 years, all these different experiences, and hopefully you'll do some exploration, you'll do some informational interviews, because I know these two probably would love to do that. I know that I'm throwing you under the bus, Jessica. I know Courtney. I've reached out to her many times to mentor a student, and she's always done that, and I'm sure that you would love to as well. Just not naming any names, but I know somebody would like to get into library science, and just, you know, maybe some of the things that might be important for this person to try to explore before, you know, in the next 3 years. Do you guys have any you know, information on working in libraries and in library science?
Well, my sister has her master's in library science, and she is one of the preservation librarians at the State House in Boston. And so she and I had a very similar academic trajectory, and then we went off in kind of separate directions, with as much as that could be between libraries and museums. But yeah, so so her background was in history and the classics, and she ultimately and collections management, because ultimately there's a lot of working with archives. I mean, and I know but I know that library science, there's 3 tracks within that in terms of more collection based and archival based, which is what she did. But then there's much more of like the public policy aspect of library science. So I think, again, an arts and humanities degree is such a good basis for something like library science, because there's so many ways you can use that, and then there's so many things you can do in library science. And this area, I mean, New England is such a fabulous place for that. I mean, I mean, we are lucky in the arts, in that there's so many opportunities in this area.
Absolutely. True. And Courtney, do you have any experience with library science?
Well, I do have a lot of experience with the Framingham Public Library. They were one of our major partners, and the former director, he was actually the president of the Palmer Main Streets organization, and he was very innovative, and he was very entrepreneurial in the direction that he took the library in general. I don't know if that relates to like the data collection side, but he brought in the 3D printer, and he brought in other ways to bring the community in there that meshed with what their needs were, and doing the outreach to the community to bring them in and meet their needs and their interests, and how they gauge that and bring foot traffic to the library. The library is a huge proponent of supporting the local businesses downtown, so we're always talking about ways the library can mesh with the businesses. And I mentioned that a lot of the businesses I work with are they're micro businesses and they're immigrant run, and a lot of the business owners and the managers, they did a program at the library called Literacy Unlimited, where they really worked on their English as a second language skill sets. And so it was really cool to see those relationships foster, and for the immigrant community to have a sense of self and ownership through their local library. So there's huge valuable roles that the library can play.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you both very much. Like I said, you're so impressive. I know Courtney. I mean, you're just like one of the most impressive people, inspirational people I met. And Jessica, when we read your kind of biography that President Cevallos sent out when you got promoted into your role, Wendy and I goes, "Wow, we haven't done anything in our life." Wendy will tell you that. I mean, do any of the staff have any questions for our wonderful experts before we hang it up for the night or the afternoon?
No question, just comment. Really, I echo Dawn. So inspirational, both of you. Every time we have an employer on that inspires me. I want to go be what you are. Like, I want to go do public policy. I want to work at a museum. I like, you've got me. I want to have a change of career at age 60. Oh my God. But thank you. Really, you bring such insight. It was incredible. Like our colleague Sarah would say, this was the best one ever. So thank you for coming. Best one ever.
Yeah, I think too, I'm one of the career counselors. Just hearing each of your journeys is just amazing to me in terms of how motivated you were. Jessica, in terms of what you were looking for, and you said, I'm not going to leave until I have this opportunity. And Courtney, just all the different paths you've taken, that just fascinates me as a career counselor, because sometimes I do have alums that will come and say, I need to do something different, and I don't know how to do that. So I found that fascinating.
I just want to say that even though I'm the internship coordinator, I did not pay either of them to sing the praises of how internships are so beneficial. But thank you.
Absolutely. And I've already talked to some of you about internships, and we do have the wonderful 2 paid programs from Framingham State. I know Courtney's well aware, but Jessica, do you know about the 2 paid internship programs that we have, that we will pay interns to work in the Danforth if they meet the criteria?
Oh, okay. I know. Yes,
yeah. You and Jill need to talk.
Trust me.
Absolutely. I just, thank you so much for all of your time, your treasures, and your talent. And I know our students and my staff and myself are just so grateful and thankful for your friendship and your partnership. And I know this isn't the end. I will see you before I go. I'm retiring next month. And I know I'm going to see Courtney before I go. And I hope to see you too, Jessica.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure. All right, thanks.